here today. So thanks for joining us for this event. This is one of a series of webinars that we're running associated with the AgTech Seeds Pre-Accelerator program. Very pleased to have some very, very exciting guest speakers with us today. Before we get to them and before we kind of start the formal part of today's proceedings, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm based in Western Victoria, so I'm connecting in from the lands of the Wadawurrung people, and they've been the traditional owners and custodians of these lands for many, many tens of thousands of years. So I'd like to acknowledge that, and also to pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and to elders of other First Nations communities who might be with us today. The reason that we're here today, of course, is to hear from Jordy and Eddie from Great Wrap. But before we get to that, I'm just going to say a little bit about the AgTech Seeds program, which is kind of the excuse for us being here, what the program's about and who it's aimed at and what kind of help it will provide with those people, for those people. We're going to have a discussion with Jordy and Eddie. We'll get them to tell a little bit about the story of Great Wrap, and then we'll open it up for some questions. We'll finish up by just talking again about the AgTech Seeds program and what comes next for that. But we're going to spend most of the time today hearing from Jordy and Eddie. So first, just a little bit about AgTech Seeds. So AgTech Seeds is a series of pre-accelerator programs that's sponsored by LaunchVic, the Victorian state government agency that's responsible for helping and fostering the growth of startups and entrepreneurship in Victoria. The program is delivered by Rocket Seeder, and Nikki and Taylor, who are with us today, are from Rocket Seeder. I'm from an organisation called Crux's Innovation, which is partnering with Rocket Seeder to deliver this program. What's the program about? It's aimed at bringing together aspiring entrepreneurs who've identified opportunities or have ideas or have identified challenges in the whole area of sustainable agriculture, and bringing those aspiring entrepreneurs together with researchers who are working on projects that are related to this area or who are developing capabilities that might be applied to this whole challenge of sustainable agriculture. We're really excited about this, firstly, because the whole concept of feeding the world sustainably is an enormous challenge that affects all of us. So enormous opportunities there. And also because we can really see some great potential in bringing together some of our aspiring entrepreneurs and some of the great capability that we have in Victoria in research to really make a difference to solving this problem. So what are the components of the AgTech Seeds program? Firstly, there's a series of events and workshops like this one. In fact, this is part of it, to inspire people that are thinking about this area and to start bringing people together and to help people develop their ideas and get a clear view of opportunities in this space. Pretty soon we'll start off the first of our 12-week pre-accelerator programs, and this is a structured program that runs over 12 weeks. It's a cohort-based program. We'll bring a group of participants together and take them through a series of tools and frameworks to help them test and validate the commercial potential, the market potential of their idea, so that we can make sure that we're actually addressing real problems, really important problems. During this program, the participants will have access to an amazing network of experts in this area, our panel of industry mentors, and we also have an advisory board with some very, very high-powered people from the Victorian innovation ecosystem and from the whole sustainable agriculture sector. Rocket Seeder has an amazing network of connections in this sector, and so everyone that participates in this program will have introductions to partners, customers, players at all levels of the value chain in sustainable agriculture, from growers to grower groups, to consumer groups, to technology suppliers, to retailers and large agribusinesses, and all of the organisations that invest in those businesses. Another kind of carrot that we've got at the end of all this is that thanks to the funding from LaunchVic, we do have the opportunity to give seed funding to high-performing teams that complete the pre-accelerator program to help them build minimum viable products. So that's yet another reason to be involved with this program. So this is the timeline for the first iteration of this program. We're in the middle of the series of webinars here. We've had 2 amazing webinars already. We're going to have another great one today, and one more next week on the 6th of June. In parallel with that, we're running a series of online events that we call design sprints that are aimed primarily at researchers to help those researchers learn how to communicate what they're working on in their research to a general audience, and to help them explore the application of that capability to sustainable agriculture. On the 14th of June, we've got a mixer event, which is where we'll start bringing those groups together, aspiring entrepreneurs and researchers with capability in this area, to start exploring the possibility of linking those up, of matching researcher capability with the kinds of problems that some of these aspiring entrepreneurs want to solve. Pretty soon after that, applications will close for the first iteration of the program, and it will start on the 11th of July and run until the 3rd of October. And after it's concluded, we'll make the awards of MVP funding, and that MVP development will happen towards the end of the year. That is enough for now about the AgTech Seeds program. Let's get on to what we're really here for. Very excited to introduce Jordy and Eddie from Great Wrap. Just a brief summary of who they are and what they're about. Jordy first is the co-founder and co-CEO of Great Wrap. And Great Wrap, as you probably know, are the suppliers of the only Australian-made compostable cling wrap. Great Wrap's mission, it's a really inspiring one, is to use food waste to eliminate single-use plastic and help decarbonise the planet. So Jordy has a degree in agriculture, and he was an award-winning winemaker before co-founding Great Wrap 3 years ago. And they've been on a very rapid and very exciting journey since then, which we'll hear about shortly. Eddie's a researcher at Monash University's Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering. Eddie's got degrees in science and in engineering. And he worked with Jordy to develop the proprietary technology that forms the basis of Great Wrap's compostable cling wrap, made from food waste diverted from landfill. So very excited to introduce them. I will stop sharing my screen, but what we're going to hear from Jordy and Eddie will be firstly a bit of an overview of the story of Great Wrap and the factors that have contributed to their success. But then secondly, we're really keen to hear about how this whole relationship between a startup and university research has happened, how that came about, what aspects of it have been very successful, what aspects of it have been challenging, and I'd like to hear that perspective both from Jordy's point of view, from the company's point of view, and also from Eddie's point of view, the point of view of the researcher. So more than enough from me, over to you guys.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And I might just go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we can maybe talk as we go through the slides. How does that sound? All good. Can everyone see that okay? Thumbs up all around. Perfect. Well, Jordy, I might hand over to you at the start today.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Oh, one moment, sorry. Sorry, it was just little interruption, but we sorted it out. Yeah, so this may be a little clunky just because I'm not controlling the slides, and we haven't practiced too much. But Eddie and I have worked closely together for a long time, and actually met at a student youth leadership forum probably nearly 10 years ago in Canberra, where we met. I think was it Malcolm Turnbull on his first day as Prime Minister? Or, yeah, yes. It was. Yeah, it was a funny little conference, which was hilarious, and stayed in touch. And then one day, yeah, we were sort of working on Great Wrap and reached out, and turns out he was working on some similar exciting things. So happy to sort of jump in, Eddie. So yeah, this is us. This is our factory. This is a combination of the two. So this is actually inside the plastics lab at Monash University on the right hand side, and then on the left, this is Monash and some of our team at our pilot facility next to one of our extrusion lines. And I guess it's sort of, you know, been quite exciting to work together because there's a lot of gaps in our extrusion manufacturing technology that we've kind of been able to kind of backfill together, working alongside of each other. And yeah, we're missing quite a lot of technology that Monash has, and then vice versa. And then Monash does have a huge amount of the sort of microbiome technology that we've been able to utilize.
Yeah, so a really big part of that is, you know, Jordy first came to me with a problem. I think it was in the end of 2020. And they said, look, we've got this fantastic startup. We want to solve a big problem. There's a whole section that we think we could be doing better. You know, we import this thing and we want to, you know, create this resin ourselves. So it's like, great. How can we solve that problem? And so we had a really good phone call, and we connected with my supervisor at the time, which is Leonie Van Hags on the left-hand side. Leonie's got the dark hair. So Leonie's got a PhD. They're a very capable lecturer and researcher from Monash University. And Leonie works specifically in my research group. We work in sustainable processing and, you know, soft matter spaces. So with this problem in hand with Jordy, we sat down as a team, and then we fleshed out a real kind of solution and ways we could do some research to look into ways to solve this problem with Jordy. And then from there, we kind of developed together alongside with the Great Wrap team. Monash is really keen to engage with more startups and use its research with these young startups who want to develop these ideas. So throughout 2021, we worked with, we're lucky enough to receive a CRCP from the Cooperative Research Council. That was fantastic. So together we worked together on an 8-month or so project, kind of showing it could be done. And then from there, we've worked with Jordy to develop into a proper research degree with the support of Great Wrap. And as Jordy just said, it's so interesting how, you know, on this right-hand side, we've got this yellow line extruder. It's a small scale one. And then on the left-hand side, we have these massive extruders that Great Wrap use, and we're able to compare and contrast with our different sizes of equipment. And really, you know, from an engineering perspective, I get quite nerdy about all of this stuff, but it's great looking at all the working with the different equipment and thinking about all the interesting things that can be done across both sides. So really, we've talked a little bit about how we connected, how we met, and I might jump in, Jordy, now just talk about really what that problem was in, you know, 2020 when Jordy got on the phone to me. And the big two things that Jordy talked about with me and that we recognize from the start is that we have a massive waste problem across the planet. And I think everyone's in agreement there. There's no disagreement on that one. Most manufacturing is pretty efficient, but there's still a massive amount of food waste and plastic waste that occurs. And what drove Jordy really to start Great Wrap was seeing the amount of plastic waste that really was coming from especially the wine industry. So we know 1/3 of the world's food is wasted. We know it produces about 8% of greenhouse gases. In Australia, just from that food waste, it's about 3%. But each year we're wasting about 7.6 million tons of food. So it's a massive amount of food that's wasted. And Monash has really been working on actually validating a lot of these numbers and starting to move more into this waste reuse space, which we're kind of seeing across the board at a lot of universities. And with plastic waste, so many tons of plastic waste is produced every year. There's some good numbers there for you, but a really big one that came out of at least 2020 was some research with CSIRO and the Monash Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering that conservatively estimated about 40 million tons of microplastics on the ocean floor. So we know we have a problem, and the only way we can solve it is with people who care and are dedicated and want to create solutions to these problems. So one of the big things we identified was that greener packaging really must be explored. And that's removing these fossil fuel-based plastics off the market, because so much of these plastics are created from chemicals from fossil fuels. They degrade really, really slowly in the environment. And it's a massive amount of fossil fuels is then used and energy to create those plastics. But with those plastics in mind, it is important to have a think about what type of plastics. And one of those big things that is kind of guiding us is looking at commodity versus barrier plastics. And I won't get too nerdy in this. I get a bit too obsessed with kind of types of plastics, but I thought I would just put in there that there's two really key different types, commodity and barrier. And we kind of separate those based on different types of plastics. So for instance, things like polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene are commodity. They're cheaper, they have poor barrier properties. And so for plastics, for say food, for instance, or for keeping things shelf stable, we might look at something that's a barrier plastic that will stop some of this oxygen permeation through the plastics, okay? So what is a solution? Well, we spent quite a while looking across the board, and Jordy was already months ahead on this when we first had a conversation. So after we talked and started scoping out what the research would be, the big thing for us is to do a big literature review. And it really shows, and especially over the last 10 years, that these bio-based polymers are a solution. And these are polymers that are produced by living organisms, usually bacteria. We usually feed them a carbon source, and this is where the option of feeding them a food waste stream, for instance, could make sense because you want to feed them a cheap waste stream. And then various species of these bacteria can store these polymers intracellularly, and then you can isolate those polymers and use those to create plastic wraps, which is really interesting. And it's been done for, I think even 30, 40 years. There's been papers produced, but a really big thing, which we see in research, is a lot of the research is very siloed. A microbiologist looks straight at this bacteria and goes, great, it can do that, I'll put a paper out. But they don't necessarily think about all the connections that can be made between the rest of, for instance, a process. And then you might get a physical chemist go, great, I can analyze this thing. But then again, it's just physical chemistry. So one of the really great things we do in chemical engineering is we take all these different areas of research and we create processes and process systems from all these different areas, which is one of the things we worked with Jordy on when we first started. So just the image down the bottom really shows you what a bio-based biodegradable plastic really would look like. Something like PLA, PHA are really kind of key plastics. So starch blends have also been looked at. We really want to move away from these non-biodegradable and fossil-based plastics. We want to make sure we're actually being smart with our plastics design and smart with packaging design. When you have a plastic wrap for a pallet, you don't need it to last 10,000 years. Really, you only need it to last maximum maybe 1 or 2. So it's really thinking about how we can be more smart with our packaging. So the process we work on is very broad, and there's loads of different areas. And working with Great Wrap and working now with Monash as well, we've been really developing what this looks like. But to give you a broad overview, our whole process is taking this food waste, we're feeding it to the bacteria, we're growing them to a large scale. We then downstream process, break open the bacteria and isolate our polymer, and then we then use it in our extruders to make a plastic wrap. So this is a bit of a general process for you. And something that is really important is making sure this whole process is made efficient. And that's what we're trying to work hard with Jordy here at Monash University. So what is our creme de la creme, and what we think is probably the most important thing moving forward? Well, we really think it's something called PHA, or polyhydroxyl alkanoates. They're a really interesting polymer. This is a version of the monomer on the top right there. That's PHB, so polyhydroxyl butyrate, is generally what we look at. It's got a methyl group on this R top here. Again, I'm not going to get too sciencey on all of you, but this is a really interesting polymer because a lot of things can be done with this polymer. They're classed in various different sizes. We have short chain length, medium chain length, and long chain length, and that really changes the properties of that polymer. And they're really produced by loads of different microorganisms when they're under carbon starvation, which is a really big thing. And they're biodegradable, bio-based, and non-toxic. So PHAs have been researched for years and years. There's a lot of research looking into them, and a lot of people have been looking at how to push bacteria to grow more and more of them and how to develop different types. And so because of this, you can get loads of different materials properties, different temperature ranges, generally pretty water insoluble. They're resistant to degradation. They have good UV resistance. And just down the bottom there is a table comparing some general properties. And as you can see, things like PHB and for instance, medium chain length PHAs, they really do have quite good elongation at breaks for a medium chain length, comparable to PBAT, which is what we want for a kind of a stretchy material. But something like PHB, which is a bit more crystalline, it's got a lot less of that stretch. So we know we need to do things, and we need to extrude it in certain ways. We need to add certain compounds to make that better as an option for us. So the reason I put all that in there was I think it's good to get a background and understand really what we target, where we want to target the growth and development of those biopolymers. But really to create the plastic, that's where we connect with Great Wrap, and we try to do some interesting innovation. We've got this fantastic yellow line extruder at Monash. It's a 16 millimeter twin screw extruder, a really fantastic piece of kit, which means we can do compounding, and then we can work with Jordy and the Great Wrap team to create these plastic wraps. And we're really lucky at Monash to have quite a lot of facilities to do characterization, to actually analyze what we're producing, which is, again, a massive cost to industry and a massive cost to Jordy and the Great Wrap team if they were to buy that equipment themselves. But through us, they have access to all these different types of analytical equipment. And, you know, from a Monash perspective, we're very lucky that we get to work with these even bigger pieces of equipment as well with the Great Wrap team. Okay, so really, I thought we'd just put some tips and key learning before we head to some of the main areas. So Jordy, do you want to start us off? I know we've only got one thing for you here, but is there some tips and key learning from working with us and working at Great Wrap that you'd like to share with everyone?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. And that was great, Eddie. Well done. Yeah, I think the other one actually I should have put in here as well was customer-centric products, and I'll probably start on that. And innovation is fantastic, there's a lot of really cool things that you can do in this space, but whether there isn't an actual need for it that people will pay for, that's sort of something that a lot of people actually sort of forget, because you get really excited about, you know, I don't know, making plastic from seaweed or potato waste, but then the reality is maybe it's 20%, sort of 20 times more in price or something else. So the biggest thing I've sort of found, and I think why Great Wrap is doing really, really well, is we always think about our customers, and we really drive that home with our team to, you know, when we're setting up a new system or a product or a way of doing things, is to just really think about it through the lens of a customer and design products for them, not just because it is really cool and exciting. But then I think, and the other one that sort of, I think, goes hand in hand with this is the benefit of working with a university is there is a lot of government support out there. There's lots of grants, like if you do the sort of Kickstart program with CSIRO, if you work with other universities as well as Monash, there's CRCP and other sort of grants and initiatives out there that can really help kind of with that seed capital to get these sort of ideas off the ground. And that's what worked for us at Great Wrap, as Eddie mentioned. We did get that government funding, the CRCP grant, which went on to help us design our commercial PHA facility, which we'll be installing next year. So, yeah.
Fantastic. There's some really good ones. I think a big one for us was trying something new at small scale was really interesting. And, you know, for a company like Great Wrap, which has all this equipment that needs to be producing, and they want to be producing as much as they can, again, to make sure that they're meeting their key targets, it's really great to work with a university who has a lot of this lab scale equipment, or at least small scale, and to be able to trial a lot of these kind of new products and do weird and interesting things. And as a company and as a small medium enterprise and a startup, you really should be doing a lot of R&D when you can, okay? Trialing these different things, running through these new ideas and putting that in practice is really key. And that's where a university, I think, could really help. The other thing is, you know, Jordy came to us with a problem, and their team, they've got their blinkers on for what they're looking at. So working with Monash means you can kind of think a bit more outside the box, because we're coming in from a completely different perspective. And so all of our different thought processes and viewpoints together creates a really great melting pot for ideas. So I would really say being able to think outside the box is really, you know, kind of helped further by a connection with the university or a research department. And then finally, I'd just say some of the key learnings is really Monash's capabilities. You know, I'm here today as someone who works with Monash. I have a lot of experience, but a lot of universities have a lot of these type of capabilities. But at Monash, we really want to be focusing on connecting with industry. We want to make sure students are leaving, especially in Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering, they're actually leaving with skill sets that are adaptable and applicable to industry, okay? And so a big thing for us is that we have long and short research projects that can be connected with through the university. We've got some fantastic students that you can work with. You can sponsor graduate degrees. We've got amazing research facilities and equipment, so much interesting characterization equipment. We've got access to analytical equipment. So there's so much there that you can utilize and work with university on. And I specifically work with a hybrid assembly group, and we've got food grade processing facilities and a food grade lab. And we have the ability to do a lot of analysis on biopolymers as well. So because we've got access to so much of this equipment and so much of these interesting and very, very smart researchers, it really can help make startups, start up a lot more clean, easy, and get a lot of that data information that can really help guide them towards further success. Perfect. This was just some references at the end. That's pretty much everything we had to show on this slide. So thank you, everyone. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Eddie and Jordy. Well, what an amazing story. And really love the way that you tell the story about how this is kind of brought together the strengths of both organisations, the positives, you know, the broad thinking, the access to government funding, the capital equipment that Monash has versus the kind of entrepreneurial spirit that and the customer focus that Great Wrap brings to this. Just a couple more questions about the kind of mechanics of how that whole relationship has evolved. Great job in getting a CRCP up and running. They're quite sizable projects. I wonder if that was the first formal interaction between Monash and Great Wrap, or whether there was a smaller kind of trial that happened first, just before both parties jumped into that pretty serious kind of long-term commitment?
Yeah, I think up until that application, we've probably been discussing quite seriously for about 6 months, really trying to figure out what it is that we want to do, the product that we want to actually create. And then I think it was once we kind of got to the end of those discussions, there was a CRCP grant that we discussed other sort of grant opportunities through, Sustainability Victoria, and had a few things on our radar. And then it was sort of just, the right time after, 6 months of sort of engaging each other and I guess kind of courting each other. It was sort of during that really long COVID period as well. So it was quite funny we'd have weekly conversations for months, and then finally got to catch up in person, I think, just before we did the application.
So that the fact that both parties, both Great Wrap and Monash, were prepared to invest some the time that it took during those 6 months of discussions, I guess it sounds like the things that enabled that was firstly the fact that, Jordy, that you and Eddie had a long-standing personal relationship, and secondly, like you said, Eddie, that it's a strategic priority for Monash to engage with startups and small companies, and Jordy, clearly there was a pretty big incentive for Great Wrap as well. So is that right? I'm kind of reading between the lines there that strategic alignment was the thing that enabled both parties to kind of make that upfront investment. While before the CRCP funding started coming on.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. And I think I guess we were lucky that we did have a bit of traction. We manufactured a prototype, had gone to market, had sales for about 18 months. So it wasn't sort of like we had an idea and came to say, we're thinking about doing this. It was we were in a really good position, which we'd had already launched. And
yeah, we also, we talk about the strategic connection, but there's also the strategic connection really in the topic as well. Agricultural startups and agriculture in itself are so important to Australia, and they're going to be so important for the next throughout the future, really, but especially as we're seeing these crazy changes in weather due to climate change. We just know how important it is, and kind of actually investing in people and in researchers in this area is so important too. So I think a lot of, especially at Monash, we really kind of focus more on some of the really key important areas, especially during COVID. And that a big one was, food security and agriculture. And so when Jordy kind of came forward with this topic, which really engaged a lot of this waste reuse, we wanted to target plastics pollution, and working in the kind of an agricultural sense as well with this small medium enterprise, it really connected all the dots at Monash. So it really was kind of just perfect topic, right place, right time. It all kind of came together really well.
And Nikki's question on the chat sort of follows on from that. I guess we can look at what happened here and we can say this came about because of the fact that, because this is a special case, because Jordy and Eddie had this personal relationship, because this was strategically aligned for both organisations. Maybe the fact that COVID was there too, maybe that even helped. But I guess what we're wondering is how can we replicate this? If we work on the assumption that there is going to be 6 months of kind of courtship that needs to go on between a university and or a research organisation and a startup before they can jump into something big like a CRC, what advice have you guys got on how we can set up similar sorts of conditions to enable that kind of courtship to happen?
I'll just start off and quickly say, I think things like this, AgTech Seeds is really important, and it really does connect people and researchers. That's kind of the point of this kind of, at least from my perspective, that's what this is about. But I'd say, at least from the Monash perspective, there is a ton of ways to engage with researchers. You can simply find any researcher's profile by just looking it up. You can put it through Google. We have thousands of different researchers across departments. If you have a problem, you're able to look up those researchers yourself, and you can find areas, people in different departments. I would also say getting in touch with a department that you think may be of interest. There's all the emails are available to the public. If you want to get in touch with engineering and you have a problem, and they can connect you with the right people too. You know, just from an engineering perspective, we have staff who are just on industry engagement, and they're just there to connect with the right kind of people for the right kind of projects. And depending on what you're after, if you have a small project and you would like to run with some students, we've got summer projects we can run with students. We've got final year projects. If you want something that's, you know, with PhD students, or you want postdocs or higher level researchers or longer research degrees, you can put all of this through in emails, or even give our department a call and be more than happy to work through with you what that would look like. But exactly as Jordy says, you know, having that kind of 6 month time to kind of build up what it looks like and actually, you know, put it together in your mind with the researcher is really important, because it's very difficult to just jump right in and write a grant with someone just straight off the bat. Did you want to add to that, Jordy, as well?
Yeah, look, I think that was great. I think I was actually chatting with a researcher from another university recently who said they get people come to them all the time, like what we did with Great Rap, and say, hey, I want to do this crazy thing. Let's try and do it. And no one actually ever goes to the university and just says, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I want to do something. What exciting technology have you developed that you would like to commercialize? And no one really goes to a university and actually just flips it on its head and say, what are you working on that's really cool and you think there's a cool product here? Like, let's do something together. Which I thought was actually fascinating, because everyone I know who's worked with the university has been like every jerk like me who's gone, you know, hot-headed straight in, I want to do this, without taking into consideration that people have been working on some exciting technology and they're actually looking for people to help commercialize that as well. So, you know, you don't have to have the best idea. Maybe there's someone out there that's already got a great idea as well. Yeah,
that's a great perspective, Jordy. And I guess that's, and yeah, like what you said before, Eddie, about the way that the programs like AgTech Seeds can contribute to that, supporting that kind of courtship period. That's exactly the kind of thing that we had in mind when we put this together. Yeah, excellent. I'm interested. I know that the relationship between Great Rap and Monash is a very important one. So I'm not looking for anybody to make things difficult there, but just interested in any insights you've got about from both of you about parts of this engagement that were challenging, but both from your side, Eddie, you know, as a researcher and kind of as a representative of Monash, and also from your side, Jordy, as representing Great Rap. Are there things that were difficult about it, things that maybe you would do differently if you were doing it over, things that you wish were different about the system that we worked in?
Yeah, I'm happy to sort of jump in there, and I'm sure Eddie will have some good feedback as well. But I think, like, when you're a startup, you're excited and you just want your idea to be everywhere, you know, tomorrow. And so you're just working at this intense velocity. And sometimes if things get in your way, then, you know, you're just like, oh, why can't everyone be operating at my sort of speed? But the reality is that, you know, these institutions have a process, and it's very good reason why, because, you know, people could run off with someone's IP or do some other things that could damage Monash or could damage, you know, whoever else. And so there's a process there that's like should be respected. And it can be sort of frustrating when you're in the midst of it, because things do sort of work slower. But you know, in reality, like, it worked at an amazing pace. For us, you know, it's not like if it didn't start with Monash, we'd be completely dead as a company. It was something that we were just working on in the background. And so I think that was sort of an important thing too, is that, you know, you don't want to be, it will take a while. It will take a few months, and you just have to expect that. And so don't sort of, you know, hang everything on getting the contracts through and everything approved and IP assigned and all of that sort of stuff. You know, just be prepared for that to take a little bit. And as long as you can factor that in, it's fine. And we were in a position in which we could do that. And it was fantastic. And so outside of that, we were still able to have really great, open, robust conversations and keep the project sort of moving whilst we worked on the legality of it all. But I mean, that's generally what startups will kind of say about working with a research institution. And you know, my advice is just respect the process and be prepared that it might take a bit of time, and that's fine.
Yeah, I've got a few things to add to that one, actually, Jordy. That's a really good point. When it comes to respecting the process, it's really important to remember that a lot of universities are quite siloed in different areas. You might have, say, an engineering department and then a medicine department, and they're connected by kind of a central department on graduate research, and then there's a department on IP, and then there's so because of that, because of the siloing of a say a larger company or a university compared to maybe a small medium startup, it's very different where you can just talk to someone maybe across the hall and get that connection you need from the marketing team. Whereas at Monash, we work in various different buildings, and sometimes that siloing can restrict some of that communication and make things a little bit slower. But it's also a really good thing because, as Jordy said, it means there's a process in there that we follow, and that means we can document everything and make sure everything follows the process so that Jordy and the team, their IP is secure too. So I think a big one is just being cognizant that the universities can generally be quite big and it may take a bit of time for things to go through. The other big one, and this is really about IP, it's really important that you sit down with the university that you work with or any research team and actually discuss IP and who owns what. Because the big output for a university is we want to put out papers. We want to produce novel, interesting research, which actually pushes forward the field. And so sitting down with Jordy and the team, that's, we can see there's great holes in the research here. No one's done this before, no one's done this. But it's important for us to work with Jordy and say, okay, but what do you own? What belongs to you? What do you not want going out right now? And, discussing what that looks like. When we finish a paper, we need to make sure we provide it to the Great Rap team with enough time in advance so they can read it and give us their thoughts and opinions if we're breaking anything. So having these kind of things in place is really important. So just keep that in mind when you first go in with that research team. What does the IP look like? What kind of papers are they wanting to produce, and how together can you connect and build that? Yeah.
There's some really awesome insights there, and I might just, I wrote down a list of things that I want to come back to you on, but maybe if we just start at the end there. I'm curious about, in broad terms, what the, of course, without getting into either Monash or Great Rap confidentiality, in broad terms, what does the IP arrangement look like when the two organisations work together? Because on one hand, Monash would probably have a bunch of reasons for wanting to own the IP, but on the other hand, in order to attract the investment to grow in the way that it needs to and actually get this stuff to the market, Great Rap might have some IP constraints there as well. So how was, in what kind of form was that resolved in the relationship between the two organisations?
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair question, and I think I guess with the CRCP, it meant that we were sort of the lead applicant, so we were able to essentially pay Monash through the grant. The government paid Monash, but through the grant funding, and we had to chip in some funding as well. But that sort of allowed us to work together and I guess have that ownership. But to Eddie's point, we also don't want to stifle innovation, and we don't want to put a hold on, publishing certain things. And really, it's essentially written that if Eddie wants to publish anything, he just has to get our approval, which we would 100% approve in any situation, because it is super, super important that this information does get out there. And I definitely think there is a startup in itself that could compile all of this information and make it in a really easy to digest way so that VCs and founders and researchers could kind of flick through and find all the information that they need, that I hope someone figures out. It might require a bit of AI and some machine learning and a few other sort of things as well.
I'm thinking it's probably a brain-machine interface, in that everyone will just plug that chip into their head and all of a sudden they'll understand how, what the world looks like from the other side.
I also want to add, I think one of the reasons that, Jordy we first started at Monash, because when Jordy got in touch, we were just chatting about where Jordy could go, who he could connect with. There's lots of different options, but a lot of the, at least from the perspective that we had with CSIRO, when you sign a contract, they own some of that IP and it's kind of not held on. Whereas Monash is really good. We want to keep pushing innovation. So the company still owns the IP. That's a big thing. And that's one of the reasons I think we connected so quickly with Jordy as well. The company still owns that IP, but we have the ability to publish papers in that area, and that's really what Monash is after. So it works well for both the industrial connection and also for the research team.
Yeah, cool. The other thing that I wanted to pick up on, just actually, maybe Annette, we'll go to you if you had a question or a comment.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm just taking the opportunity. There's so few people on the call to jump in as well with a question. And Jordy and Eddie, congratulations with the CRCP and great rep. It's amazing to hear the success. Jordy, you mentioned consumer-centric product development. Can you maybe elaborate on how Great Rep has approached this, and also maybe interaction with the university partner? Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Everyone says it, but it's like, what does it actually mean? And so I think for us, we're a direct-to-consumer company. So we currently sell a cling wrap for home, but I'm sitting at our Tullamarine factory. It's 12,000 square meters, where we're sort of scaling up to a huge pallet wrap factory that'll be one of the largest in Australia quite soon. And so that sort of is commissioned in September. But I think in regards to being that direct-to-consumer company, you have a really fast sort of feedback loop. Someone gets their order, they don't like it, you'll get an email within an hour. You know, it's like when you buy shoes online, if they're the wrong size, you'll return them online almost immediately. And so that is actually incredibly valuable because, you know, our product wasn't perfect. We're a startup. There was a lot of problems we had to solve initially, and we have, you know, to start with, it was pretty entry-level manufacturing equipment. So to sort of get going and having all of this feedback, like it wasn't sticky, it wasn't stretchy, it wasn't the elongation, or and some of the you know, people didn't quite vocabularize what you know we were thinking, but we could work it out, and you know, we'd jump on calls with people. We just call them up and say, you know, it's Jordy here, you said something wasn't quite working, and you can see a lot of that early feedback on our Google reviews. And so yeah, we sort of went through that process and listened to customers and tried to figure out, well, how can we increase that stretchiness or that stickiness and other sort of problems, and we've been able to work in the plastic lab at Monash quite a lot to sort of try and solve these problems with new waste additives, and yeah, it's been a really sort of fun journey that's allowed us to create something that actually does work, and it does look and feel the same as petroleum. But again, like if you can start as a consumer product, it is actually incredibly handy, because if we were a pallet wrap company and we sold to distributors, it would take months before that feedback came back, and we've probably already ruined that relationship. Whereas consumers, they're much more forgiving, and especially when it's something new and exciting, and especially in Australia, you know, we love to sort of buy something, try it, and you know, our product's relatively inexpensive, and they go, oh, look, it doesn't quite work, but like, keep trying. And then, you know, we'll keep those people on a list, and we'll send them out every time product improves, we'll send them out something and a sample and see how they're sort of tracking. So if you can build a startup around a consumer product, it does make it a lot easier to get that customer feedback.
Well, that's a great insight. And I know there's a whole class of venture investor that the only metric that they're interested in is how quickly can the company learn and how quickly can the company iterate. And so what you're basically talking about is shortening that loop. So yeah, that's I know there's a bunch of investors that would really love that, and you've probably spoken to most of them. The other thing, Jordy, that you mentioned before that really jumped out at me is something that I think is that you did that's really subtle and really smart, that you were very modest about, and that is, you know, the relationship with the university has turned out to be really important, and the stuff that you've developed in collaboration with the university is you know, probably going to be really central to the company's future. But in the early days when that relationship was developing, you'd set things up so that what the university was working on actually wasn't on the critical path for the company, if I understand correctly. I mean, that the company was able to keep doing most of what it was doing and keep generating most of its revenue, at least for some period of time, while the whole university collaboration process sorted itself out, rather than it being, we've got to get this going now because otherwise we're all going to have to find new jobs or something like that. And I think there was, yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in that. Just want to say, want to explore, Jordy, whether that was something that you very consciously set up right at the beginning, or is that just the way it panned out? What have you learned from that?
Yeah, no, it's super true, and something I'm really passionate about. Like, for us, it's achievable. Like, if you were setting up a new green hydrogen company, you can't just like I don't know, launch with like a beta version, get a few customers. Like it's just a different industry. Like, but for us, we were able to at first work with a product that wasn't made from food waste. It was compostable. We got a contract manufactured overseas. We could do a small launch, and that was kind of like our minimum sort of viable product. After that, we could get a small factory up and running, and again, sort of use existing biomaterials, but this time made from food waste. And so we kind of had all these like stepping stones, so that it wasn't like, okay, well, we need to research for 2 years. We need to raise $50 million worth of venture capital. Like that's just like so unrealistic. And you know, it does work. Like someone might have a plant-based cheese alternative that is something really, yeah, exactly. The lean startup is a great reference point for this. And I think it's just trying to figure out how to kind of get something out there and start learning. And I think a lot of people are perfectionists. I definitely am in a lot of ways. And so you think, oh, what I go to market with has to be absolutely perfect. My website has to be perfect. And everything has to be amazing. Like the first website we built on Shopify ourselves, it was shocking. It was all super clunky. You know, like all of these things are wrong. The product didn't work that well, but you just need to get out there and get learning. And so, yeah, I think like not relying necessarily on the utopian end picture, knowing that you are working to that is really important, because it'll give you the personal motivation to keep going, knowing where you kind of want to be. But like those initial stages, it's just about making something that remotely works, and getting some key learnings.
This is really fabulous. I spend a fair bit of time, I won't say teaching, but working with researchers to try and help them get some of these kind of lean startup principles and sort of general customer engagement principles into their heads. And when we start talking about the concept of the minimum viable product, you know, most of the examples that are out there are software examples, because you can knock something up in software pretty darn quickly. And we all know the example of Facebook, you know, that people very, very low technically in that organization are empowered to, without permission from anybody else, test things out on alarmingly large numbers of customers at any time of day or night. And they do that all the time. And that's why they're so successful. But a lot of people really, myself included, really struggle with, okay, what's the hardware analogy of that? I'm not a software company. I actually make stuff. What's the MVP version of that? And you guys have just described an awesome version of doing exactly that. So yeah, go full marks. That's great stuff. And I guess I'm imagining that you know, clearly the relationship with the university and with Monash has been really helpful for the company. There's a whole bunch of technology that will find its way into products that wouldn't have existed without that relationship. But Eddie, from your side, I'm imagining watching the way these guys work, watching the way they think, watching the way they, you know, how customer focused they are. There's probably a lot of value for the university and for the research group in that as well, because I mean that isn't the main business, as you say, of the university. The main business of the university is to identify and you know, work towards gaps in our knowledge. But having that kind of partnerships with people that do kind of think differently and work differently is probably very valuable. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. You also got to remember that we have a lot of students as well, and they want to know the connections with industry. They want to know what they can leave and go do. So you know, we've got undergraduate students from first all the way up to fifth year in chemical and biological engineering, for instance, and we bring in Jordy, you know, sometimes to do some lectures or get involved, and it inspires students because they can actually see, oh, I can take my engineering knowledge and I can apply it, and I can actually try and fix problems. So not only is that perspective, we really want to keep showing that to students to keep them engaged, and you know, remind them that they don't need to go just to oil and gas or mining. There's so many other possibilities out there, and also, you know, it's about showing them that there's a wealth of opportunity out there when it comes to actually problem solving in the market too. So for us, it's not only inspiring students, but it's also showing them that there's a lot of different things they can go into. And then from the research groups, it's the perspective that Jordy and the team can give. You know, Jordy and the team are really fantastic at working very agilely. They'll work on problems, they'll put their head down, and a month later they'll have a solution to that problem, and then I'll move on to the next thing. And we really like, you know, learning from that and growing and developing. You know, in our, for instance, a PhD, it's 3 and a bit years working on a thesis. years. And you really do look at the whole market in the first year, but then you kind of get your blinkers on and you start going down the rabbit hole. So it's really important for us as well to remember that we are trying to move quite agilely. We need to be able to work with Jordy and the team. So it's really great for us to be able to think about how we work a little bit differently and apply that to our research as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. And a related but maybe slightly off the wall question from Emma on the chat there. Emma, by the way, as you might know, is the managing director of Rocket Seeder. So she's actually the reason that we're all here. Unfortunately, Emma's got a pretty serious back injury at the moment, which is why she's her video's turned off and she's not talking to us. But yeah, great question. Given all those insights that you're getting from Great Wrap and all that inspiration, what would it take for you to leave research, Eddie, and actually become a startup entrepreneur yourself?
So, I mean, it's such a good question. Just a bit of backstory about me. So in 2019, I worked with Monash University to develop the basically Australia's first student brewery. It's called Monash Brew Lab. Actually quite big. They're at GABS this year, the Great Australian Beer Spectacular. So that was fantastic. And we've started that up and that had so much fun doing that. And when I finished my degrees, I had an opportunity to work with the Northern Territory Government and AgriFutures and Monash Food Innovation, which Emma may know as well. And I worked with them for many months on developing, looking at minimal viable product, for instance, as well, but looking at jackfruits in Australia and how they can be implemented. So that was a great 8-month kind of project. And then from there, I jumped on ship with Jordy. So for me, I'm really passionate about the space in the market of food engineering and kind of sustainable manufacturing. I think there's really great holes in the market there. I love working on a lot of this equipment, but the big reason why I love working with Jordy and the team is not many companies come forward to you and say, I want to fix a problem. I want to solve a problem. I want to fix a problem in society. I want to do it in a way that we can grow as an organization and that we can offer jobs and support people. But this is the problem I want to fix. And Jordy throughout has always been, it's a waste issue. That's what we're doing. And no matter what, that value is what underlies under everything. And I really, for me, I connect a lot as a researcher and someone who wants to support a more healthy and sustainable society. So for me to jump ship, it would probably take a lot of work at this point. I really like working on the problems we have. So as long as we keep having those, kind of value statements that guide us, I think that'll be my key to keep working with Jordy and the team.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. Really inspiring. And that alignment of vision, that's vision and values, I guess. If they're aligned, then you can kind of make everything else work. But yeah, good stuff. Folks, we've almost run out of time. Really appreciate the time that both of you have given us today, and that our audience members have too. Maybe just a quick reminder about the AgTech Seeds program before we finish up. So yeah, things are well underway here. We have one more webinar and one more design sprint next Monday. So we'd love to see you at those. But then the next big event is this online mixer event on the 14th of June, and that's when we'll start bringing aspiring entrepreneurs and researchers together to start trading ideas, or to start talking about problems and solutions and how they, or capabilities and how they might match up. So that's going to be a really exciting event. We'd encourage all of you to jump to the AgTech Seeds website and sign up for that. There's an email address at the bottom of the screen here. If you've got any further questions or need any more information, we'd love to hear from you. But the other thing is the green text at the bottom of the screen there. If you're ready now to jump kind of to the end here and jump straight into the AgTech Seeds program, we'd love to see an application from you. We've already got some very, very exciting applications to participate in this program. So yeah, if you fall into that category, we'd love to hear from you as well. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. That's pretty much all we've got. Anyone got any final questions, observations, comments before we close it up for the day? Thanks, Tan. Glad you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us, Annette. All right, we might call it quits there. Thank you very much, everyone.